The Aegean Sea at dawn 4,000 years ago. A merchant ship cuts through the morning water, low in the waves, heavy with the cargo of a civilization at its peak. Copper from Cyprus, linen from Egypt, saffron from the hillsides of Anatolia. Olive oil in sealed clay jars, pressed by hand on terraced groves and bound for ports the sailors have never seen. The ship is Cretan. Its sailors answer to no emperor. They carry no weapons beyond what they need to feed themselves. They have no fortifications to return to, because their island has no enemies. For 1,000 years, the Minoans ruled the Mediterranean without needing to conquer anyone. In the hills above the harbour of what is now Heraklion, the palace waits for the ship to come home. Knossos, 3 stories high, 1,300 rooms, built of stone and cedar and plaster painted the deep red of dried blood. The walls are decorated with dolphins and octopuses and young men vaulting over the horns of bulls. The bathrooms have running water, the drainage is sophisticated, the foundations are engineered to survive the earthquakes that have rolled through this island for 10,000 years. A Minoan woman walking through the halls of Knossos in 1700 BC would have seen frescoes painted by artists whose techniques would not be rediscovered in Europe for 3,000 years. She would have worn jewellery forged with a craftsmanship that would not be matched until the Renaissance. She would have spoken a language that no living person today can understand. The Minoans emerged around 3000 BC on the largest island in the Aegean, a long strip of mountains and valleys and deep harbours that made it the natural hub of everything the Bronze Age wanted to trade. By 2000 BC, they had built palaces the likes of which the world had never seen. By 1700 BC, they were wealthier than any society in Europe and most of those in Asia. Their ships carried goods from Spain to Mesopotamia. Their influence reached Egypt, where tomb paintings depict Minoan emissaries bringing tribute to the court of the pharaohs. And yet, in every way that the Bronze Age measured power, the Minoans were strange. They built no monumental tombs for their kings. We have no evidence they had kings. Their palaces contain no throne rooms, no royal portraits, no inscriptions celebrating conquest. Their art does not depict battle. It depicts nature, dolphins, lilies, young men and women leaping over the horns of bulls in some ritual whose meaning is lost. The Minoan world, as it appears in the surviving frescoes, is a world of colour and water and movement. It is the strangest ancient civilization we have ever found, because it looks, in every visual sense, peaceful. And they wrote. Sometime around 1800 BC, Minoan scribes began pressing symbols into wet clay. They were recording inventories, trade goods, religious offerings, taxes, the routine bureaucracy of a complex administrative state. The script they invented is called Linear A, and it contains roughly 90 syllabic signs and 150 signs representing whole objects. We have about 1,400 Linear A inscriptions. Some are on clay tablets baked hard by the fires that eventually destroyed the palaces. Some are on stone altars used in religious ceremonies. Some are scratched into the walls of caves. They survived because the Minoans pressed them into soft earth, and the earth hardened, and the earth kept them safe for 3,500 years. When the British archaeologist Arthur Evans began excavating Knossos in 1900, he found them almost immediately. He was a wealthy, obsessive Victorian Englishman who had bought the hill the palace sat on with his own money. He was looking for evidence of a pre-Greek civilization in the Aegean. What he found exceeded anything he had imagined. He named the civilization Minoan, after King Minos of Greek mythology, the ruler of Crete, whose palace was said to have housed the labyrinth of the Minotaur. The name stuck. The civilization had been recovered. The writing, however, would not cooperate. For the rest of his life, Evans tried to read the Linear A tablets. He failed. Every scholar who tried after him failed. The script was clearly a writing system, not decoration. The signs repeated. Patterns emerged. The Minoans had left behind a library and no one could open it. And then, sometime in the late 17th century BC, the volcano woke up. It was called Thera. A round island 100 kilometers north of Crete, ringed by high cliffs and centered on a deep caldera from an eruption so ancient that no one remembered it had happened. Thera had been a Minoan colony for centuries. Its main town, Akrotiri, was a little replica of Knossos, 3-story buildings, painted frescoes, a sewage system, ships in its harbour, children in its courtyards. When the mountain began to tremble, the people left. We know they left because when the ash came, it buried the town intact, and there were no bodies in the ruins. The Minoans had read the warning signs and walked away. What they walked away from, they had no framework for imagining. The Thera eruption was one of the largest volcanic events in the history of human civilization. It ejected 60 cubic kilometers of rock and ash into the atmosphere. The column of smoke rose 30 kilometers into the sky. The sound of the explosion was heard in Egypt, where it was recorded in the royal annals as an omen. Ash fell across the eastern Mediterranean in drifts meters deep. And when the mountain finally collapsed in on itself, the sea rushed into the caldera and then rushed back out. A tsunami of at least 50 meters raced across the Aegean at the speed of a jet aircraft. It hit the northern coast of Crete without warning. It destroyed every harbour the Minoans had built. It drowned every ship in every port. It scoured the coastline clean. For a civilization whose entire wealth depended on the sea, it was an extinction event in the slow form. The Minoans did not die in a single afternoon. They died over the following century, as their trade networks collapsed. Their fields failed under the ash. Their cities were weakened by earthquakes, and their enemies on the mainland finally grew strong enough to do what no one had ever done to them. Around 1450 BC, the Mycenaeans from the Greek mainland landed on Crete. They did not find a civilization waiting to fight them. They found ruins. They found the palaces still standing but mostly empty. Administered by a diminished population that had neither the numbers nor the strength to resist. They took Knossos without a siege, and then they did something that has haunted linguistics ever since. They kept the writing system. The Mycenaeans could not read Linear A either. But they took the signs and adapted them to write their own language, which was an early form of Greek. The new script is called Linear B. It used many of the same symbols as Linear A, often with the same phonetic values, but it recorded a completely different language. For centuries after the Mycenaeans themselves collapsed, both scripts were forgotten. They sat in the earth. They waited. In 1952, a British architect named Michael Ventris cracked Linear B. He was 30 years old. He was not a professional linguist. He had been obsessed with the script since he was a teenager, when he had heard Arthur Evans give a lecture about it in London. Ventris assumed, as everyone had assumed, that Linear B recorded the same language as Linear A. He expected it to be some pre-Greek tongue, extinct and strange. He was wrong. When the signs came together under his method, the language that emerged was Greek. Not classical Greek, an older form of Greek, 500 years older than Homer. It was a stunning discovery. It meant Greek had been spoken on Crete earlier than anyone had dreamed. It meant the Mycenaeans had been present in the Aegean far longer than the archaeological record suggested. And it meant something else. Something that broke hearts in classrooms around the world. If we know the phonetic values of the signs from Linear B, and if Linear A uses most of the same signs, then we can pronounce Linear A. We can read it aloud. We can sound out every tablet the Minoans left behind. It just does not mean anything. The words we produce when we transliterate Linear A belong to no known language family. They are not Indo-European. They are not Semitic. They are not Anatolian or Egyptian or anything we have ever seen before. Linguists have proposed connections to Etruscan. They have proposed connections to the Luwian languages of Anatolia. They have proposed that it is a language isolate, like Basque, with no living relatives anywhere on Earth. Every proposal has been tested, none of them have held. What this means, in practical terms, is that for 70 years we have been able to read aloud the words of a people we cannot hear. We can sound out a Minoan tax record. We cannot tell you what it taxes. We can pronounce the name a priestess carved into her altar. We cannot tell you who she was praying to. We can say the word a merchant wrote on the lid of a jar of olive oil. We cannot tell you whether it is his name or his destination, or the word for oil itself. Michael Ventris died in a car crash in 1956, 4 years after his great discovery. He was 34 years old. He had spent his life chasing one script and accidentally cracked the other. The one he had set out to read remained and remains unbroken. Today, linear tablets sit in museum cases in Heraklion, in Athens, in the British Museum, in the Louvre. They are beautiful objects, small, unassuming. A palm of clay covered in precise, careful marks made by scribes who would have been astonished that their records survived for 35 centuries and amused, perhaps, that the people who found them could not understand a word of what they said. Somewhere in those cases is the word a Minoan wrote for water, for mother, for the sea they built their civilization upon, and the sea that ultimately destroyed it. The word exists. It is preserved in fired clay. It is stable and legible and in its phonetic form entirely accessible to any modern person with a few hours of study. We just cannot understand it. The Minoans are the only civilization in human history we can hear but cannot listen to. Every other ancient language we have cracked, whether through bilingual texts or statistical analysis or sheer persistence, has eventually given up its meaning. Hieroglyphics, cuneiform, linear B. Even the oldest Chinese oracle bones can be read by scholars with decades of training. Linear A remains, not hidden, not lost, just silent in the way that a song becomes silent when no one alive remembers what the melody meant. The Minoans did not write their history. They wrote their receipts. They wrote the names of their gods and the weights of their olive harvests, and the offerings they made to keep the sea calm. They were an administrative people. What survived of them is the paperwork of a functioning civilization, kept in clay, baked by the fires that ended them, and preserved by the earth that received them. We have their voices, we cannot translate them. And on a quiet afternoon in Heraklion, if you go to the museum and stand in front of a tablet from the last century of the Minoan world, you can read it aloud to yourself if you want to. The sounds will come out of your mouth in a rhythm that no one has heard spoken naturally in 3,500 years. And you will be, for that moment, the closest thing to a Minoan speaker that the world currently contains. You will not know what you're saying, and neither will anyone else.